The social structure and social interaction are fundamental parts of living in a society. Understanding the components of the social structure and the sociological explanations about the rules that guide social interactions can help us understand our behavior and the behavior of others. Social structure gives us the ability to interpret the situations we encounter on an everyday basis. For example, we expect our families to care for us, our schools to educate us, and our police to protect us. When our circumstances change dramatically, most of us feel an acute sense of anxiety because we don't know what to expect or what is expected of us. This chapter may be more manageable to relate to, as we all play roles in society and we all have statuses. So we can think about our own lives and our own experiences as we explore this chapter. So let's get on and get started, and I hope you find this useful. Here we go. Social structure provides the framework within which we interact with others. At the macro level, which is the big view level, social structure is the stable pattern of social relationships that exist within a particular group or society. This structure includes social institutions, groups, status, roles, and norms. And we're going to look at all of these. It provides a map for our encounters, but it may also limit our options by creating boundaries that define which persons are in the inside and which are on the outside. At the macro level of all societies, certain basic activities routinely occur. Social institutions are the means by which these basic needs are met. Functionalist theorists emphasize that social institutions exist because they perform 5 essential tasks: replacing members and teaching new members, producing, distributing, and consuming goods and services, preserving order, and providing and maintaining of a sense of purpose. Now, conflict theorists, they also believe that social institutions are originally organized to meet basic social needs. However, they argue that social institutions maintain the privileges of the wealthy and the powerful while contributing to the powerlessness of others. So we're going to begin looking at a few different categories or subtopics. We'll start with social marginality. This is a state of being an insider or part insider and part insider, and it can result to be followed by stigmatization, anything which devalues social identity, so it disqualifies an individual from full social acceptance. For example, a convicted criminal wearing a prison uniform is an example of a person who's being stigmatized. The uniform says that the person has done something wrong, and should not be allowed to be unsupervised. People who are homeless are marginalized in society as well. Now, one of the terms that we're going to explore is what's known as status. Now, it's an important feature about status. It's a socially defined position in a group or society, and it's characterized by certain expectations, rights, and duties. The status of professional athletes, rock musicians, professors, college students, and the homeless person all exist exclusive or separate of the specific individuals who occupy these positions. And so what's important here is statuses are such that they exist, they're there, you're going through post-secondary to fill a job. That job will come with a status, whether you're in that job or somebody else is in that job. And so the status is what it is. It's our job to fit within that status. And we either achieve it, exceed it, or we don't. So let's look at, for example, although thousands of new students arrive on college campuses each year to occupy the status of first-year student, the status of college students and the expectations attached with that position has remained relatively unchanged over the years. The term status does not refer to high-level positions only. Sociologists use it to refer all societies' defined positions. Now, you're not likely to have just one status. You may have more, in which case you have a set or a status set, and it's made up of all the statuses that you as a person occupy at any given time. A person may be a psychologist, a professor, a wife, a mother, a Roman Catholic, a school volunteer, an Ontario resident, and a French Canadian. That's their status set. You have your own status set as well. Now there's two elements about status. One is something that we have as we are born, and one is something that we earn as we grow older. Ascribed status is the first. It's a social position conferred on a person at birth or received involuntarily later in life. For example, Marie, she's a female born in French-Canadian parents, and she was assigned these statuses at birth. She didn't choose them, so they are ascribed. Now, achieved status, this is the social position a person assumes voluntarily as a result of personal choice, personal merit, or direct effort, such as occupation, education, income, or thought to be gained as a result of personal ability or successful competition. Most occupational positions in modern society are achieved statuses. Now, ascribed statuses have a significant influence in what achieved statuses we can occupy. Ethnicity, gender, age can all affect each person's opportunities to acquire certain achieved statuses. Now, we'll also have what's known as, in many of our cases, a master status. This is a term used to describe most important status a person occupies. It dominates all of the individual's other statuses and is the overriding ingredient in determining a person's general social positions. Now, for some it will be parent, for others it will be their occupation. Being poor or rich is a master status that influences many other areas of life, including health, education, and life opportunities. Now, historically, the most common master statuses for women have been related to positions in the family, such as daughter, wife, mother. For men, occupation has usually been the most important status. Although occupation is increasingly a master status for many women as well, master statuses confer high or low of the personal worth and dignity of people. These are not characteristics that we inherently possess. They are derived from the statuses we occupy. So if we've been talking about statuses, now we can touch base here now on status symbols. These are material signs that inform others of a person's specific status. In North American society, people who have made it frequently want symbols to inform others of their accomplishments. For example, just wearing a wedding ring proclaims that a person is married. Owning a Rolls Royce, for example, may announce to others that, well, you've made it. Status symbols for those with homes and the homeless may have different meanings. Among affluent persons, a full shopping cart in the grocery store or bags of merchandise from an expensive department store indicates lofty financial positions. By contrast, among the homeless, a bulging shopping bags and overloaded grocery carts suggest a completely different status. So let's look at some of the other defined terms. Role. A set of behavioral expectations associated with a given status. We occupy a status, we play a role. Now, role expectations are a group or society's definition of a way a specific role ought to be played. You know, when you take on the role of a student, you have role expectations, and then the next piece will be role performance, how a person actually plays the role. Role performance doesn't always match role expectations. Some statuses have role expectations that are highly specific, such as that of a surgeon or even a university professor. Other statuses, such as friend or significant other, have less structured expectations. The role expectations tied to the status of student are more specific than those for being a friend. So you see how they vary in terms of role expectations. Some are much broader, some are much narrower. So role expectations are typically based on a range of acceptable behavior rather than on strictly defined standards. So we have these different aspects of role. Role ambiguity is when the expectations associated with the role are unclear. If you're asked to do something within a role of student that you find to be not very clear, then that sort of causes a bit of ambiguity. And so that's part of what does happen with many roles that we play. Role conflict occurs when incompatible demands are placed on a person by two or more statuses held by the same person at the same time. Now, another term used in the same category is what's known as role strain, when incompatible demands are placed on a single status that a person occupies. And then lastly, there will be what's known as role exit. And this occurs when a person disengages from social roles that have been central to their identity. We go through a process in 4 stages where you start to have some doubt, you search for alternatives, you have a turning point, and then a creation of new identity. And some of this might be around even as simple as retiring. A social group consists of 2 or more people who interact frequently and share a common identity and a feeling of interdependence. Groups are another important component of social structures. Throughout our lives, most of us participate in groups, from our families and childhood friends to our university classes to our work in community organizations and even into society. We're going to look at 2 forms of groups, primary groups and secondary groups. Primary groups are a small, less specialized group of members which engage in face-to-face, emotion-based interactions over a long period of time. Whereas secondary groups are larger, more specialized groups in which members engage in more impersonal, more goal-oriented relationships over a limited period of time. So typically, primary groups include your family, close friends, school and work-related peer groups. Schools, churches, and corporations are examples of secondary groups. Now, social solidarity or cohesion in relationship to groups and social structures relates to the group's ability to maintain itself in the face of obstacles. Social solidarity exists when social bonds, attraction, and other forces hold members of a group in interaction over a period of time. Now, a term that you will use from time to time you might be familiar with is social network. This is a series of social relationships that link individuals to one another. Now, some of these can be face-to-face ones of your network of friends, and some can be more virtual, like in social medias and the like. Now, we're going to quickly go over formal organizations and looking at what they are. Formal organizations are highly structured groups formed for the purpose of completing certain tasks or achieving specific goals. For many of us, spending a lot of our time in formal organizations such as universities, corporations, and government organizations is a part of what that is. Formal organizations are an important component to social structures in all industrial societies. We expect such organizations to educate us, solve our social problems such as crime and homelessness, and to provide work opportunities. Now let's look at what are social institutions. Now, social institutions are a set of organized beliefs and rules that establish how a society will attempt to meet the basic needs of all of its social members. Social institutions are the means by which these basic needs are met. At the macro level of all societies, certain basic activities routinely occur. Children are born, children are socialized, groups and services produce and distribute, and law and order is preserved, and a sense of purpose is maintained. In the past, these needs have centered around 5 basic institutions: the family, religion, education, economy, and government and politics. Today, you can include mass media, sports, science and medicine, and the military to be considered as social institutions. Now, some of you may be wondering, and good for you if you were, aren't social institutions just another form of group? Well, a group is composed of specific, identifiable people, whereas an institution is a standardized way of doing something. So when we talk about one's family, we're referring to a specific family, your family, for example. That's a group. When we refer to family as a social institution, we're talking about ideologies and standardized patterns of behavior that that organize family life. For example, a family as a social institution contains certain statuses organized into a well-defined relationship, such as husband and wife, parent and child, sister and brother, and so forth. Specific families don't always conform to these ideologies. You have single-parented families who are moms, who are dads, so that's more specific as a group. So let's look at some of the theories associated with social institutions. And we'll start with Functionalist Theory. And they see social institutions existing because they perform very essential tasks. First, as was mentioned a little bit earlier, is replacing members. Because we have families that produce children, so societies and groups must have socially approved ways of replacing members who move away or die. And so as a social institution, the family is a big part of that. We have children, and those children become part of what we socialize, and replacing members of society. Now, secondly, teaching new members. Now, people who are born into a society or move into it must learn the group's values and customs. And so we, again, can look at the family, we can see education, media, and as it relates to immigration, we can look at government as being a part of that process of educating new members into what the group values and customs are. 3, producing, distributing, and consuming goods and services. All societies must provide and distribute goods and services for their members. And in terms of the social institution, we identify the economy as being that social institution that supports that. 4, preserving order. Every group or society must preserve order within its boundaries and protect itself from attack from outside. And as we've noted in more recent times, government, military are being important elements to this social institutions that contribute to that. And then finally, and 5th, we have providing and maintaining a sense of purpose. To motivate people to cooperate with one another, a sense of purpose is needed. And so we look to the social institutions of religion, cultural institutions, sports even, contribute to this element. Now, alternatively, if we look at conflict theorists, they argue that many social institutions don't work for the common good of everybody in society. Now, for example, the government maintains the privileges of the wealthy and powerful while contributing to the powerlessness of others, is their argument. Conflict theorists do agree with functionalists that social institutions were organized to meet the basic social needs. However, they don't agree that social institutions work in the common good of everybody in society. They would say they know that some families abuse children, and states tend to support the wealthy but not the marginalized. Religion might control people rather than give them the meaning and freedom in their lives. Now let's move towards stability and changes in society. And changes in social structure have a dramatic impact on the individuals and groups within that society. Both Emil Durkheim, he introduced mechanical and organic solidarity, and Ferdinand Tönnies, he introduced Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft, a development of typologies or categories to explain the processes of stability and change in a social structure of societies. We'll begin with Durkheim. He was primarily concerned with what holds society together. What's the glue that holds society together? In pre-industrial societies, we were held together by strong traditions, by the members' shared moral beliefs and values, whereas in industrial societies, they were held together by members' shared dependence on one another. So social solidarity stems from society's social structure, which in turn is based on society's division of labor, was Durkheim's perspective. And division of labor refers to how the various tasks of society are divided up and performed. People in diverse societies, or in the same societies at different points of time, divide their tasks somewhat differently based on their own histories, physical environment, and level of technological development. Now, to explain social change, Durkheim developed a typology that categorized societies as having either mechanical or organic solidarity. Mechanical solidarity, this is the social cohesion in pre-industrial societies in which there is minimal division of labor and people feel united by shared values and common social bonds. Now, Durkheim used the term mechanical solidarity because he believed that people in such pre-industrial societies feel more or less automated sense of belonging. They don't have to think about it. They depend on one another, and they have a lot of face-to-face interaction. It's more intimate. It's more like primary group relationships. Everyone is engaged in similar work. There's not very much specialization in terms of the division of labor. Now, his organic solidarity, well, the social cohesion in industrial societies, which people perform very specialized tasks and feel united in their mutual dependence. Everyone has a job that's important to the overall running of society, is the central message there. Durkheim chose the term organic solidarity because he believed that individuals in industrial societies come to rely on one another in the same way that the organs of the human body function interdependently. Social interaction is less personal, more status-oriented, and more focused on specific goals and objectives. People no longer rely on morality or shared values for social solidarity. Instead, they're bound together by practical considerations, what works and what doesn't work. Now, for Tönnies, his terms included Gemeinschaft, and this is a traditional society in which social relationships are based on personal bonds, of friendships and kinships, and on intergenerational stability, that mom and dad help with the children, the grandparents are involved, and this gets passed on intergenerationally. These relationships are based on ascribed rather than achieved status. In such societies, people have commitment to the entire group and feel a sense of togetherness. Now, Tönnies' use of the German word Gemeinschaft was because it means commune or community. Social solidarity and social control are maintained by the community members, and members have a strong sense of belonging. They have a sense of also limited privacy. They're more open. Now, Gesellschaft is a larger urban society in which special bonds are based on important and specialized relationships with little long-term commitment to the group or consensus of values. In such societies, most people are strangers who perceive that they have little in common with one another. Consequently, self-interest dominates and little consensus exists regarding values. Tönnies selected the German word Gesellschaft because it means association. Relationships are based on achieved statuses, and that the interaction among people are both relational and calculated. So if we take a shift away from this macro view and start moving into what we would look at as the social interaction and the micro perspective. At the micro level, social interaction, the process by which people act toward and respond to other people, is the foundation of meaningful relationships in society. Social interaction within a society is guided by shared meaning, expectations of how we're supposed to behave, while interaction rituals may be shared by subjective meaning, the individuals assigned to them or not. So, social construction of reality refers to the process by which our perceptions of reality is shaped by the subjective meaning we give them in terms of our experience, meaning because of how we're socialized in our society is the subjective, the perspective that we are taught, and that's the meaning that we are given to an experience. And the meaning in which in turn is influenced by race, ethnicity, gender, and social class. Now, the dominant group members with prestigious status may have the ability to establish how people define reality. Dominant groups perpetuate a dominant worldview that is frequently seen as a social reality. And so we could consider in a lot of the things that we do is part of how we understand the world around us because of our own independent thought, or is it influenced by a dominant group that perpetuates this worldview and makes it our social reality and gives us access to this social reality? And it's a big, larger question around whether or not we really define everything by our own personal experience, or is it affected by other influencing factors. If we consider what are known as the ethnomethodology, it's a study of common sense knowledge that people use to understand the situation in which they find themselves in. Ethnomethodology contributes to our understanding of meaning by exposing subconscious social reality using breaching experiments to reveal background expectancies. Now, ethnomethodologists examine existing patterns of conventional behavior in order to uncover people's background expectancies, that is, their shared interpretation of objects and events, as well as their resulting actions. Now, in order to uncover people's background expectancies, ethnomethodologists use rule breaking, or acting as if they don't understand that some basic rule in social life exists, so they can observe what other people's responses are. They call this breaching experiments. Now, a good example would be my wearing shorts in the wintertime. I can't tell you how many people feel the need to let me know when they see me. Am I unaware of the temperature? Do I not know that it's not appropriate to wear shorts in the wintertime? I'm breaking a social rule in society that others feel the need to inform me about and make sure that I'm, aware that I shouldn't be wearing shorts. I've been doing this for 27 years. It's surprising how many people can't ignore that sort of thing. They have to speak out. And that would be an example of a breaching experiment. So let's continue on. Let's now explore sociology of emotions and what is nonverbal behavior. Now, we are socialized to feel certain emotions, and we learn how and when to express or not express emotions. We require a set of feeling rules, which shape an appropriate emotion for a given role or specific situation. Feeling rules include how, where, when, and with whom an emotion should be expressed. For example, for the role of a mourner at a funeral, feeling rules tell us which emotions are required. Sadness and grief, for example, which are acceptable, a sense of relief that the deceased no longer has to suffer, and which are the unacceptable, like enjoyment of the occasion and expressing laughing out loud. So these are the rules. Now, the sociology of emotions helps us understand that social context of our feelings and the relationship between the roles we play and the emotions that we experience. Now, when we move into nonverbal communication, this is the transfer of information between people without the use of speech. And we're going to go through a number of them. So this includes visual cues, gestures, and appearance. But it also includes, vocal features like inflection, volume, pitch, cadence, and the environmental factors like the use of space and position that affect the meaning of our words. Facial expressions, head movements, body positions, and other gestures carry as much as the total meaning of our communication with others as our spoken words do. So let's sort of figure out what are some of the functions that nonverbal communication provide us. Well, we obtain first impressions from one another in various kinds of nonverbal communication. The clothing people wear and their body positions provide first impressions. Nonverbal communication provides information about emotional status. Head, facial movements may provide us with information about other people's emotional states, or others receive that same information from us. It's through our body posture and eye contact we signal that we do or do not wish to be spoken to or speak to somebody. So for example, if you're walking down the sidewalk and off in the distance when we pass a homeless person, we look away so they won't ask us for money. Nonverbal communication establishes the relationship among people in terms of their responsiveness to and power over one another. We show that the responsiveness towards or how we like another person by maintaining eye contact, an attentive body position where we maybe lean forward, we have our eyes on them, and perhaps by touching and standing close. Nonverbal communication is used to express power or control over others. Researcher Goffman in 1956 suggested that demeanor, how we behave or conduct ourselves, is relative to social power. There's a term that's known as deference, and it's the symbolic means by which subordinates give a required permissive response to those in power. You know, whether that's the bowing of your head or the backing away or the eyes turned down to another person, it confirms the existence of the inequity and reaffirms that the person's relationship, reaffirms each person's relationship to the other. That's deference. Now, first, facial expressions, eye contact and touching as a form of nonverbal communication. Nonverbal communication is the symbolic of our relationship with others. The key issue is status of the person who is doing the smiling, staring, or touching relative to the status of the recipient. Think of the times when you've been pulled over by an officer in a traffic violation that you've committed. The way that you non-verbally are aware that you've done something wrong, and the status of the officer can influence the non-verbal communication that occurs between the two. Facial expressions, especially smiles, also reflect gender-based patterns of dominance and subordination in society. Women typically have been socialized to smile and frequently do so even when they're not happy. Men tend to display less emotion through smiles and other facial expressions, and instead seek to show that they are reserved and in control. It's worth noting that as much as in sociology there's a depiction of men and women in sort of dichotomous roles, and we always know that there's also this gray in between. But in an effort to try to make clear some of the concepts, it's kept in a dichotomous men this and women that as a way of just making clear the concepts and the realities that do exist for many people, even though there is a gray area in between. And this could represent change over time, and we'll get to that in a minute. Women and men use eye contact differently during conversations. Women are more likely to sustain eye contact during conversations, but not otherwise, and as a way of showing their interest in and involvement with others. Excuse me. Men, well, they're less likely to maintain prolonged eye contact during conversations, but are more likely to stare at other people, especially other men, to challenge them and assert their own status. Now, a lot of this is done very unconsciously. Gender and power differences are evident in tactile communication from birth. Women may hug and touch each other, indicating affection and emotional support, while men are more likely to touch each other to give direction, assert power, or express sexual interest. Now, another form of nonverbal is personal space, and this is the immediate area surrounding a person that the person claims as private. Now, that will be this bubble, if you will. When others invade our space, we may retreat or stand our ground or become angry. And you'll know when this has happened because your emotions will shift from where you feel comfortable to when you start to feel uncomfortable. Our personal space is contained within an invisible boundary surrounded by our body, much like a snail shell. Now, power differentials are reflected in personal space and privacy issues. Age, gender, all kinds of relationships, social class, ethnicity, and religion help define what is an appropriate personal space. Learning to understand and respect alternative styles of social interaction enhances our personal effectiveness, by increasing the range of options we have for communicating with different people in diverse contexts and for varied reasons. While it's difficult to generalize about people's nonverbal behavior, we still need to think about our own nonverbal communication patterns. Recognizing that differences in social interaction exists is important. We should be wary of making value judgments. The differences are simply differences. As we move forward, macro and micro analysis are essential to the determination of how our social structures should be shaped so that we can respond and deal with major social problems such as homelessness, poverty, and addictions. All right, well, I hope you've enjoyed this chapter. I know it was a little longer than what I typically try to do, but it's one that tries to pull a lot of what we've already done together into a cohesive bundle. I hope it's done so. Good luck, everybody. Keep up the good work.